Well, good evening. We are at the Lone Star Railroad Park in Lewisville, Texas for part one of a two-part evaluation of the Coast Polysteel 1000. Now, I was asked to do this review and I try to accommodate these requests whenever I can. Part one tonight will be at an area where I have a significant amount of light pollution. I'm going to pan around here. We have some dark areas in the park, but we also have a number of the fields that are lit up, and we're also inside city limits. So I think almost any light can look good under perfectly dark conditions. So part one of this test is we're going to see what the light looks like in what I would call a fairly highly polluted environment. Now I got three lights in front of me. Which one of these is the coast? Well, it's this one right here. And yes, you're right, that's a big one. In fact, when I first took it out of the box, it reminded me of those old school mag lights, those really big lights that I used back in my security guard days in college. We used to call them skull crushers. Now, one of the reasons that the light is this size is that it's powered by 9 AA batteries, and those have to fit somewhere. Now, what do you get for your 9 AA's? Well, let's go over here and look at the literature that comes with the product. That may be a little bit hard to read, but you've probably seen online that you've got 3 modes: high, medium, low, peak lumens 1000, 345, and 98 across the modes. But the key aspect there is the run time. Now, I probably need to do this more often, so I'm going to pause and do it now. These numbers can be confusing sometimes. I mean, when we talk about lighting systems, you'll hear the term lumens, lux, and candela a lot. And what do these measures really mean? Well, lighting systems are typically evaluated according to a standard called ANSI FL1. Well, let's go back to, what are lumens, lux, and candela? Well, lumens are a measure of light output. You can think of it as an emitting source putting out an amount of light over some specified volume. Volume is 3-dimensional, so lumens are kind of difficult to measure. Those are measured in the laboratory using equipment like an integrating sphere. It's a fairly difficult measure, but it's light output over a specified volume. Now, as that light is projected downrange, it falls on surfaces. Lux measures the amount of light falling on a unit surface, and lux will decrease with distance. And as light strikes a surface, we perceive it with the human eye as luminance or brightness, which is measured in candela. So I've already explained lumens. That's a laboratory measurement. Beam distance is also kind of a theoretical measurement. ANSI FL1 states that beam distance is measured at the distance at which the light will project a quarter lux onto a surface, which is generally compared to a full moon on a dark night. So if you've ever been out on a fairly dark night under a full moon and looked out into an open field or a road or something, that's roughly a quarter lux. Again, a very theoretical measurement. That doesn't mean that you will be able to perceive the light on a surface at that distance. That's just the ANSI specified measurement. Runtime could get very complex. We have 11 hours stated at the high mode on this light. What that means is with a fresh pack of batteries, from 30 seconds at the point the light is put into that mode until the light output, remember that's lumens, drops to 10% of its original value. Of course, these measures can get even more complicated if the light is regulated. Well, that's a fairly long introduction, so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and take the light out. I'm going to show you what it looks like in this environment, and along the way I'll talk about some of my experiences and the UI. And in part 2 of this evaluation, we will be at the LBJ grasslands outside of Decatur, Texas. We'll get a chance to look at what the light looks like in a darker wilderness environment, and after we are through with an extended evaluation of that environment, I will do a bit of a torture test. Okay, I've moved out to the end of the parking lot. I have the light in high mode now, which is a peak of 1000 lumens. There's an adjustable focus system, and so you can adjust the light from a very tight beam, which I have it now, out to a very wide flood. So let me pan it around. Now, it's always hard for a cell phone to do justice to what I'm seeing with the unaided eye, but with this beam, there's a drop-off in front of me, and I have fairly decent illumination of the trees at the far end. And let's pan over here towards the field. Now we're getting into an area where we have a significant amount of background lighting. You can see the beam is still kind of holding up. Now I can just barely make the hot spot out against the building. So this is kind of a worst case scenario with background lighting. I'm going to move on down into much darker areas. I'm going to let you see what this drop off and all of this area looks back here. And then in the next segment, I'll talk a bit about the user interface. So in the last segment, I said there was kind of a drop off and there were trees off in the distance. You can see here that that drop off, which we could not make out before, is a lake. Now we're getting to a much darker area, and you can see the light out into the distance. I'm going to pan back around to those trees that we were looking at before. Now the user interface is a single button, and I've got to admit I'm not much of a fan of that because there's something called a momentary mode that was implemented, and the preferred way of cycling through the modes is to go through the momentary mode, which is a partial press. So that gives you a button that to me has a very spongy feel to it. I would have preferred to have a separate control for the mode, although this is more of what I would call a strategic light in the sense that I'm just going to put this light in one mode, and then I'm going to use it for, the duration of whatever that activity is in that one mode. Now, we still have quite a bit of light pollution, and if memory serves, Google Maps says it's about 140 or 50 yards from where I'm standing to those trees, and I can just barely make out the hot spot going across the trees, although I kind of doubt that's coming out on my iPhone. So let's go on down the path and try the light out in another dark area. All right, we are at one end of a football field. I'm standing at the goal post. I'm going to slowly move the camera and the light up. And I am now illuminating the scoreboard at the opposite end of the field. And I'll pan over here. There's the opposite goalpost. You can see if I was searching for something across the field, this is still a very good beam. there is the building that we were looking at earlier. And again, this is in an environment that is just a ton of light pollution, but I like to look at worst case scenarios during reviews. Now, the other aspect of the UI is it has an adjustable focus system. This is done by a twist of the front cap. When you first take the light out of the box, that twist may take some effort. I'm not going to show you that tonight because there is, again, so much additional light around. It really would not do that display justice. So we're going to look at that in part 2. I'm going to go ahead and end the evaluation for part 1 right here. I think you've seen, again, what the light looks like in more or less a worst case scenario. We've been running in high mode with the spot. So part 2 will be at the LBJ grasslands outside of Decatur. We'll get a more extended evaluation in a wilderness environment. We're going to see what the pure flood looks like. And the most important part that everyone is interested in, yes, that's right, the torture test. So hang on, part 2 is coming. Okay, well, you're actually getting one bonus segment tonight. I am back at my apartment. I'm standing on top of my truck right now because I like doing kind of crazy things. And we're still in a pretty heavily light polluted environment, but not as bad as where we were before. Now I'm looking at the back of a shopping center that's over 150 yards from my current position. And again, it's probably not showing up great on the iPhone, but I can see that there are 2 trees out in the distance, and I can light up the edge of the building. And so I can see all of that out there at this distance. Again, even in a fairly heavily polluted environment, and we've got a half moon out tonight. So I thought I'd give you one more data point before we get out to the LBJ grasslands, and then we'll see what the light looks like in a wilderness setting. Well, here we are at the LBJ grasslands outside of Decatur, Texas. I do search and rescue as a private contractor with a specialty in wilderness night operations. I do most of my night SAR training out here, and I also lead guided expeditions here at the grasslands. Now, in terms of how I deploy, I'm a ground-based element. I do not have the luxury of loading gear onto horseback or an ATV or anything like that. If I want to deploy something, I have to load it up and carry it. Ounces are pounds, pounds are pain. And every piece of gear I carry has both a weight cost and a volume cost. Now, there's a big difference between urban and wilderness operations. There is certainly a good use case for the really big, large, 10, 15, 20,000 lumen searchlight. In terms of most wilderness operations, I tend to gravitate towards much smaller, lighter weight flashlights. So I wanted to return to this comparison again and put it in a little bit of perspective. On the outside here, these are the 2 largest lights I've ever deployed in the field in a wilderness setting. One of them happens to be an IR illuminator. The other over here is a dedicated blue light. And notice how both of them, these are the biggest lights I've ever taken out in the wilderness. Both of them are completely dominated by the size of this Polysteel 1000. So I kind of want you to keep that in mind when I come back and talk about use cases in later segments. The reason I'm filming this particular segment while there's still daylight out is I wanted to show you around the area. I'm going to walk around the camp area here where I'm parked, kind of let you see what it looks like. We've got the road right here. Now, as I come up to this tree on my right side, if you look out to the furthest extent of the trees in front of me, according to Google Maps, that's a solid 100 yards plus. So keep that in mind. We'll look a little bit up and down the road here, off into the distance, back towards the Tadra campground. Tadra stands for Texas Arabian Distance Racing Association. As I say in every one of these videos, that's a campground that also serves as the trailhead for all the named trails here at the Grasslands. Looking back at the truck and then back down the road. So this will give you some perspective of what we will be lighting up once it gets dark. Well, we are back, and you are not looking at the Polysteel 1000. Oh my, I have lost my light. Where could it possibly be? I just don't know and get... Oh God, I tripped. Oh, I stepped on it. Yes, it's been buried underneath dirt and other stuff now for about an hour and 5 minutes. So as you can see, I'm starting the torture test. I'm going to have to put the camera down. Turn the other light off. And as you can see, it lit up just fine. Now we are currently running this in pure flood. So it's basically twist all the way counterclockwise for full flood, full clockwise for the spot beam. So we're looking around camp here on high mode. Going to walk around a little. As I come up to this tree on my right, I'm about 10 yards further back than I was when I told you we were over 100 yards. So we're a good 110, 115 plus away from the edge of those trees. So I'm going to put the iPhone down here for a second and adjust. Okay, I'm not sure how that's showing up on the phone, but I have good visibility out to the trees, at least in terms of detecting that there are trees out there. We've got a 3/4 moon out tonight, and that's going to affect the way the beam looks. Let's walk out here further, get out to the road. Yeah, this is a perfectly clear night. Now, I like to do these evaluations in imperfect conditions. As I said in the prior part of the review, that everything looks good when it's perfectly dark outside. So we're right up here at the road now. So let me pan a bit to the right, back to the left. Got a vehicle coming behind me, so I'm going to try to finish this up pretty quick. But yeah, I can see just barely out to the edge of the road there, and I'm going to go ahead and shut this segment down, let this vehicle pass, and then we'll finish up the evaluation. Okay, we're going to do a couple of drop tests, and there are a couple of reasons I do torture tests like this. One is with a new brand. I've never owned a Coast Light before, and so if I'm ever going to use this in some sort of search and rescue context, I need to know how far I can push the platform. I need to know that I can trust it, out to a certain envelope of operation. But the main reason is because the people who asked me to do the evaluation insisted on a torture test, and well, I like to make the viewers happy. You'll see drop tests Remember that ANSI FL1 standard I talked about? That's actually 6 drops from a minimum height of 1 meter. So you can think about it as I got the light out here, you know, dropping it in this orientation, then this orientation, then this, top, right, top, bottom, left, right, up, down. So 6 different directions. Now, you have to do that from a minimum height of 1 meter. So sometimes you'll see a check mark in the packaging. It's kind of a check mark icon. It may say 1.5 or 2. That means it's satisfied the drop test from those distances. I don't pay too much attention to those. What I try to do is simulate, you know, like absent-minded things that I might do that would cause me to drop the light. So the first one is, I've got a bunch of gear up here on the truck. I've got the light position maybe like this. I've got a whole bunch of gear spread all around the truck. And I've been out for 4 hours. I'm tired. I may not be thinking well. I'm preparing a final report on my search, and I'm just trying to get, you know, all my gear squared away so I can check in with incident command, and then the night's over. And then all of a sudden I'm moving around and I do something like this. Okay, I knocked the light off the top of the truck. Okay, it's still working, that's good. The other thing I might do is I might be doing a targeted search. Let me put this in more of a, I have to put the phone down. Okay. So we're back to that tight spot. And I'm doing a very targeted search of an area. I've got the light up at about shoulder, I'd say about 6 to 8 inches above the shoulder. I'm going to move it up a little bit higher. I'm going to move it up to head high. So I'm searching this area. It's late September, let's say, the peak of the ragweed season. My allergies are acting up. Ahoo! And then it causes me to drop the light. Okay, well, it made it through that one. Let's go back up here to the truck. All right, this is a real good hard surface right here. I'm going to drop it from head height. I run about 5'7", so, you know, let me get it. There we go. So that's at about eye level. I'm going to drop it right on the face. Okay, so it made it through that one, and I dropped another light. Okay. You know what I'd like to do is go into this area, show you the beam one more time, do one more quick test, and then we'll talk about use cases. Well, there's too much dust in the air for what I wanted to show you, so I'm going to come up on the last test here. I also want to point out that I did a water test before I came out here, filled the bathtub up with 6 to 8 inches, dropped it in for a little over 20 minutes, pulled it out, no effect. Okay, we're getting up close to a tire here. I'm going to simulate the final boneheaded, absent-minded thing I might do. I'm packing up all my gear. I get in a hurry. I accidentally drop one of my lights. Lands right there. Yeah, that's about right. Get my keys out here. I'm really in a hurry. I just want to go get some coffee. Just for all you keeping score at home, this is not part of any ANSI standard. I'm just doing this for fun. And of course, because viewers wanted a torture test, you're going to get a torture test. Oh, I felt that. And again. Ooh, one more time. There we go. And there's the light still going. Okay, well, Coast has a reputation for building a tough brand. I think they proved it. With this particular light, I still have to ask the question of, what use case do I have? How would I actually use this light? And as I turn back towards the truck here, I think I have the answer. I mean, for me, this would be a very good truck light. It would be a light that I could just keep in the truck, and I'd only have very occasional use for it in search and rescue applications. It's just too bulky for a general loadout, but for work around the truck, for light searches around the truck, like if I was searching up and down that road, for example, had to get out of the truck, make a targeted search, and this just happens to be the only light that I have on me. And sometimes that happens. I come out to a location just for a fun night hike or for training or teaching some sort of class, and then I just get caught up in whatever situation happens to be going on, and someone's lost, and a training session turns into a full-on search and rescue exercise. So it's better to have some light in the truck, even though maybe I really wish I would have bought one of those much larger searchlights with me. It's better to have something that's not burning the batteries of my my more portable lights. And of course, I still tend to think of this thing as a skull crusher, like I said in the previous part of the review. And I don't know what to make of it. It's a light that definitely has a lot of features. It's very durable. And, there are some lights out there that have a lot of functionality, a lot of use. They're really good lights, and you might have reason to use it as a melee weapon, as a last-ditch, defensive weapon. I almost tend to think of this as something that is, so built up, so durable that I would look at it as a melee weapon first and a flashlight second. In fact, that reminds me, the only thing I haven't done is a strike test. Now, honestly, the fair thing would be to do that on like a real big heavy bag. And the only thing I've got here in front of me is a tree. If I did a real hard strike on a tree, I can pretty much guarantee that would make the light fail. I do have access to a huge heavy bag though, but that's back at the apartment in the gym. So, well, I guess I can't close out the review list. We've got one more test to do, so hang on. I've got an hour-and-a-half drive plus a coffee stop, and then we will reconvene in the gym. Well, here we are again at another location. This is the gym at my apartment complex. You can see we got a very big bag here. Now, last segment I talked about a strike test, and I agreed to do a big torture test on this light. So this is a very big heavy bag. So what I'm going to do is simulate a defensive situation where I'm forced to use this light as a melee weapon. We're going to look at some different strikes. I'm going to do kind of some back fist strikes, then jab or thrusting motion, and then finish off with good hook. I'm supposed to be recording this as well, so let me get a little bit better grip on the phone here, and I'm just going to have to apologize for how this looks. But okay, that's about as hard as I can strike. We'll do one more, which is a good old baseball swing. We're going to swing for the fences here, and okay, yeah, I made it over the center field fence with that one. As you can see, it is still working. Credit where credit is due. Congratulations to Coast for a great build out on the durability. Oh, you want to see one more? 2 more. Literally, that's as hard as I can do it. I can follow it up with 1 more toss out on the floor. Get the lanyard disconnected here, and yeah, there we go. Again, fantastic durability. I still come back to the light itself though. I've already got several lights in my inventory that both from a flood and spot perspective dramatically outperform this. And those lights are lighter, much less bulky. Now you may say things like, well, you know, what about 11-hour run time? But I get fantastic run time out of my other lights with 18650 or 2700s. I carry spares. I can run those in interval mode anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes at a time, and I've been out on exercises in excess of 6 hours, and I don't even come close to burning those lights down. So it really comes down to performance. So you might say, well, but they're also more expensive. Yeah, that's true, but what's a couple $100 measured against increased efficiency and dramatically increased performance when I'm searching for your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife? That's the person who's out there lost in the wilderness, who's dealing with the wild animals, first stages of hypothermia. Yeah, a couple, even $300. I don't even care about that. You know, again, my use case, that's just my perspective on the light. I think it's going to end up being a great truck light. I'll refresh the batteries. I may at some future point do a burn down test, put a lux meter on it over the course of several hours. If that's something you're interested in seeing, let me know. But again, from my personal perspective, I think this is just going to end up being a truck light. If you're one of the people that requested this review, I hope you got what you were looking for. If this is a light that you were considering, I hope you got enough information to make a decision one way or another. But no matter how it comes out, I appreciate you watching the video, and thank you very much for your time.